Today on How It's Made. Decorative sombreros. Hats the way I like it, just brimming with facts. Salad dressings and marinades. They're perfect for making lettuce actually taste of something. Cap guns. For those lazy cowboy kids who can't be bothered to shout bang. And regenerative medicine. It may sound like a bottle of cough mixture that refills itself, but it's not. But first... The sombrero is a traditional Mexican hat with a large brim that's designed to cast a wide shadow over the face and shoulders. Everyday sombreros are made of straw, but mariachi bands and other performers wear fancy ones, made of velvet, wool or felt, with elaborate decorations. These sombreros are made as decorative tourist souvenirs. Artisans construct and decorate each one entirely by hand. They start by placing a sun-shaped cutting die at the centre of a large sheet of thick paper. As the press closes, the die slices through, making a hole. Next, they place the sheet between two hot sombrero-shaped forms. These mould the paper to the shape of the hat's brim. The excess is trimmed off and the perimeter stitched to reinforce the edge. The brim is soaked in a gelatine solution and then it's laid out in the sun to dry. This stiffens the paper. Next, they fold a sheet of paper and die cut another shape. They sew the far ends together to form a circle. This will form the top of the sombrero, called the cup. Glue is spread along the base, where it's attached to the brim. Glue is also applied to this paper circle. Then they place the cup on the same hot form they used to mould the brim. After shaping the cup, they reinforce the top with the paper circle. The sombrero is now fully constructed. The next step is to cover it in fabric. They coat the surface with glue. Then, section by section, stick on pieces of velvet or felt. They start with the cup. The fabric has to be pre-cut and sewn to the correct shape. The next section is the brim's underside. They trim off the excess fabric with a razor blade and cut away the fabric over the cup. Next, a piece to cover the top of the brim. Throughout this process, the material is pulled taut and smoothed down. A final trimming and the sombrero is fully covered. Elsewhere in the factory, automated machines weave spools of metallic and synthetic string into colourful trim patterns. Artisans in the decoration department cut out paper motifs and cover them in trim. Then they make colourful appliques by sewing the motifs and sequins onto velvet-covered paper shapes. They glue these appliques to the sombrero. Finally, they glue trim around the edges. This holds the edges down and finishes them off nicely. On snazzier sombreros, all the decorations are sewn by hand. There are no glued-on appliques. The artisans complete every sombrero with a fabric lining in the top, then a drawstring. Handy for wearing this Mexican memento, or more likely, hanging it on the wall when you get home. Supermarket shelves are stuffed with salad dressing, which is handy because though salad is good for you, it doesn't really taste of much. Nowadays, you can get loads of different kinds of ready-made salad dressings and marinades. When I was a kid, it was just salad cream. Salad dressings can be cream or mayonnaise based, or oil and vinegar based. This particular line of dressings and marinades is made entirely of certified organic ingredients. It's also gluten-free and sugar-free. While the salad dressing's base stays much the same, the seasoning ingredients vary to create different flavours. The one we're about to see being made is a sun-dried tomato and garlic vinaigrette. On the production floor, they start by heating water, then adding tomato paste. Next, dried basil goes in. All ingredients are poured directly into the vortex created by the mixing blade to ensure thorough blending. Next, they add sun-dried tomatoes, minced garlic, and salt. After 15 more minutes of mixing, they stir in soya oil and extra virgin olive oil. Both oils are extracted using a mechanical press, rather than the cheaper chemical process. The last ingredient is gluten-free red wine vinegar. Whereas the oils provide both taste and texture, this vinegar produces a full-bodied flavour. Cooking another 20 minutes or so on high heat stabilises the product, giving unopened dressing a shelf life of up to a year. On the bottling line, a machine called the inverter flips the empty glass bottles upside down. Then from underneath, an air nozzle shoots in a blast of filtered air. This loosens any dust or dirt particles inside the bottle, enabling a vacuum to then suck them out. Another inverter flips the bottles right side up again as they enter the filling machine. When they leave the filler, the bottles pass through a machine which dispenses plastic caps. Then, with a row of spinning discs, twists them on. Finally, a tamper-proof seal and labels. The marinade production process is much the same, but with different ingredients. This batch is sesame teriyaki flavor. A key component is gluten-free tamari, a Japanese soy sauce made without wheat. Again, the process begins by heating water in a cooking kettle. They pump in tamari, pour in salt, then powdered ginger. Next, minced garlic and sesame seeds. Then agave nectar, a natural sweetener that's got a low glycemic index. They add pureed ginger. Then expeller pressed soya oil mixed with xanthan gum as a thickener. About 20 minutes cooking on a high heat and this sesame teriyaki marinade is ready for bottling. Like before, the glass bottles undergo a vacuum cleaning en route to the filler. Their pistons suck up the marinade like a syringe, then inject it into the bottles. The filled bottles go through the capper, then travel on a conveyor belt to the next machine, which slips a plastic neckband over each cap. A shot of hot steam shrinks the neckband tightly around the cap, creating a tamper seal. Finally, the labelling machine applies glue to the back of a paper label, then wraps it around the passing bottle. Besides flavouring and tenderising raw food before cooking, you can also pour marinade over meat, fish or vegetables while cooking. A surefire way to let the gourmet out of the bottle. Coming up, a word in your shell like about regenerative medicine, a subject that grows on you, I hear. And we round up a posse of imaginary cowboys to check out cap guns. See you after the break. A cap gun is a toy revolver. When you pull the trigger, it makes an explosive sound like a gunshot. The caps are tiny dots of gunpowder. They come on either a plastic ring or a strip of paper inserted in the gun. Bang bang, you're dead. Get up and let's play again. Cowboy-style cap guns were the rage in the 1950s and 60s, during the golden age of westerns. At this small American factory, the guns are made from the original molds that were discarded by the major toy companies of the day when they stopped making cap guns. Caps are little dots of gunpowder about 1.5 millimeters in diameter, sandwiched between two strips of paper. Pulling the trigger releases the hammer, which strikes the cap, exploding it. This injection moulding machine makes the grips, the face of the gun handle. It shoots hot liquid plastic into 10 grip molds simultaneously. The plastic cools and solidifies in just seconds. The colour and design of the grips vary by model. This one on the Rancher-style cap gun features a steer's head. The rest of the gun is made of cast zinc. Workers load a zinc bar into a smelting pot heated to 400 degrees Celsius. The bar melts within a couple of minutes. The molten zinc travels through heated pipes to a plunger, which injects the zinc into a gun parts mould. The zinc takes just 10 seconds to cool and harden. Then it's just a matter of separating the parts. The gun's main body, which contains the right side of the barrel. The loading gate, which covers the cap box. The cylinder, the left side of the barrel, and toy bullets. These go into the cartridge for effect. The trigger and the hammer are cast in a separate mould. Every piece has flashing, excess metal that forms in the gap between the two halves of the mould. After removing as much as they can with pliers, workers file down the rest. Some flashing is quite thick, so they use a sander to remove it. Workers rinse the smooth parts in acid to clean the surface, then electroplate them with zinc. They dip the parts in a clear liquid coating to make the matte surface shiny. Now assembly can begin. First they install the spring, which opens the loading gate. They take the left side of the barrel at the latch that holds the loading gate closed, and the spring which puts tension on that latch. And finally the guiding disc, which turns the cylinder when you squeeze the trigger. They screw all that to the main body, which contains the right side of the barrel. Next, they insert an orange plastic safety tip into the end of the barrel. Law requires this to prevent cap guns from being mistaken for real firearms. They hook the spring to the gate's latch to hold it closed. Then they install the hammer spring and hammer. Two brass grommets secure the cylinder turning arm and the pusher which feeds the caps one by one out of the cap box into striking position. The trigger spring keeps tension on both the cap pusher and the trigger. Next, they install the loading gate. After hooking up additional springs, workers attach the top part of the hammer spring to the holding pin on the hammer. Then the bottom part of the hammer spring to the holding pin on the frame. Finally, the plastic grips, one for each side of the gun handle. Being cast from vintage moulds, these cap guns feature intricate scroll work, sadly rarely seen in toys these days. Mind you, no matter how fancy they are, I'll take me chances with me old bow and arrow. Ow! Oh, I'll surrender. Over! I'll give myself up, Sheriff. Please. You've made your point. When parts of the human body break down or are damaged, options are limited. Scientists are working on providing replacement parts on demand, like fingers, ears and bladders. Laboratory-engineered bladders have already been successfully implanted in humans. The stuff of science fiction may soon be reality. They begin with a mould, a finger mould on the right and an ear mould on the left. These moulds can be made of synthetic polymers or natural material, such as collagen. Scientists will grow real cells on the moulds. To obtain those cells, a scientist first extracts a small piece of cartilage from the body. She chops it into small bits. She transfers the cartilage to a test tube, partially filled with a special enzyme. This enzyme dissolves tissue, leaving only the cartilage cells. She then places the test tube in a centrifuge for a high-speed spin. This causes the cartilage cells to separate from the enzyme solution and settle on the bottom. She siphons off the liquid and the tiny cells remain in the test tube. Next, she adds a red liquid. It's a culture medium. It will act as a fertilizer to stimulate cell growth. Transferred to a Petri dish, she swishes the mix to disperse the cells. Then it's into an incubator warmed to 37 degrees Celsius, body temperature. It's the perfect environment to spur more cell growth. Meanwhile, a computer-controlled machine builds the mold of the ear. It layers synthetic polymer to produce an authentic-looking shape. This process takes about 5 hours. In the meantime, the cells have multiplied 20 times. The scientist drips them onto the completed mold, where they continue to grow. In the future, cell-covered ear molds could be implanted under the patient's skin. Cartilage would form, and the body would accept the part as its own. Other scientists are working on growing blood vessels and heart valves. They start by extracting a type of stem cell from human blood. The researcher first fills a test tube with a clear high-density solution. He adds diluted blood to the clear solution. Almost instantly, the different components of the blood begin to separate. The heavier red blood cells plummet, and the lighter stem cells rise to the top of the test tube. A spin in the centrifuge leaves the components visibly separated, allowing scientists to retrieve the desired cells. They'll convert them to endothelial cells, which line the inside of blood vessels and heart valves. In the meantime, they construct the blood vessel mold. The scientist adds solvent to liquid collagen, causing it to instantly dissolve. He adds small white beads. They're synthetic polymers. And they liquefy over a period of about an hour. They spray the collagen mixture onto a rod that spins as a carriage moves it to and fro for even coverage. The collagen and polymer mixture quickly solidifies around the rod. The scientist slides off the now hardened biomaterial. He now has a mold for shaping a human blood vessel. He coats the mold with the microscopic endothelial cells, which by now have grown and multiplied. He then pumps fluid through it to simulate blood flow. This conditions the cells to go with the flow, and collectively operate as real blood vessels. To grow a heart valve, they don't actually build a mould. They use a real valve from a pig. The scientist plunges the pig valve into a container filled with a mild detergent. It goes into a machine that shakes it up. The agitation helps scrub off all the cells, leaving only the valve skeleton. He saturates the valve skeleton with human cells, where they grow and thrive. The research team then pumps fluid through the valve, just like they did with the blood vessel. This trains the cells to do the work they would need to do in the human body. Even Dr. Frankenstein would be impressed. Eerie. Well, that's all from us, amigos. Time to head off into the sunset. Mind you, I feel like getting dressed up and hitting the sauce. That would just cap the night off nicely. But anyway, I'm not going to bang on about it, because now you know how it's made.
Sasquatch or Gibbon? That's the question for the BFRO team tonight at 9 in brand new Finding Bigfoot. Then at 10 on Discovery, is there concrete proof of the first traces of alien life within NASA's unexplained files?